What if I told you that the main threat on a cold night is not the frosty wind, but the surface you are lying on? While we fear drafts and cold air today, the ancient peoples of North America knew a simple truth. The ground is a silent predator. It draws heat faster than any wind, turning sleep into a deadly risk. And it was this force that they learned to negotiate with. For thousands of years, people living in conditions that would seem like a senseless ordeal to modern humans survived without sleeping bags, thermal blankets, or high-tech equipment. But they had another resource, a deep understanding of nature. They knew a fundamental law of physics: heat goes down, and if you give it to the ground, you lose. Their system of heat conservation was not a craft, but a philosophy. It was based on two pillars: the ideal floor and a special breathing technique. The first protected against the merciless ground, creating a multi-layered platform from branches, grass, and skins that acted as a natural heat insulator. Watch the video to the end to learn how Native Americans created warm beds that could protect them from the cold even in the snow, and how one breathing secret could determine whether a person would wake up in the morning or fall victim to the silence of the winter night. What if I told you that everything you believed about surviving in the cold isn't entirely true? We instinctively fear cold air and wind, wrapping ourselves in extra layers. But indigenous peoples knew that the real enemy was motionless, silent, and right underfoot. That enemy was the earth itself, which acted as a bottomless reservoir, sucking heat from any warm object that touched it. This process is called thermal conductivity, which is the direct transfer of heat from one object to another. Air, even very cold air, is a poor conductor of heat compared to solid or moist soil. You can stand in the cold for a long time, but as soon as you lie down on the frozen ground, your strength will begin to leave your body at an alarming rate. The ancient inhabitants of the plains and forests understood this intuitively by observing the world around them. They saw how snow melted under the body of a sleeping animal, even if it was covered with thick fur. This was clear evidence that heat does not rise but descends. Therefore, their entire strategy for spending the night was based not on fighting the air, but on insulating themselves from the ground. This philosophy completely changed the approach to shelter construction. The primary task was not to hide from the wind, but to create a barrier between the body and the surface of the planet. Any flooring, any layer of skins was, first and foremost, an insulator from this merciless heat conduction. Modern tourists know this rule. The most important piece of equipment is not a sleeping bag, but the mat underneath it. Native Americans discovered this law thousands of years ago. They developed complex, multi-layered flooring systems that were designed for one purpose: to deceive the ground and prevent it from stealing precious body heat. That is why a person who simply wrapped himself in the thickest skin and lay down on the bare ground risked much more than someone who lay on a properly constructed bed of branches but was covered more lightly. The struggle for warmth began with the struggle for the right foundation. This fundamental principle was the basis of all their sleeping techniques. They did not try to heat the planet, they tried to isolate themselves from it. All their genius was directed toward creating this critically important barrier. This concept seems simple, but its complete disregard was the cause of the demise of countless inexperienced travelers and settlers who tried to adopt their way of life. They copied their clothing and dwellings, but overlooked the invisible foundation of their survival. Modern science has only confirmed what the peoples of the Great Plains and forests have always known. In the battle against the cold, the winner is the one who controls the surface beneath them. They elevated this principle of thermal insulation to a high art. We would love to hear your opinion. Which law of physics, thermal conductivity, or convection, do you think poses a greater threat to a person sleeping in the wild? Write about it in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our research on ancient technologies. Are you ready to learn the truth about the one step taken before construction began that determined 90% of success? Before even thinking about gathering branches or preparing skins, an experienced person spent a significant amount of time on the most important stage, choosing a location. A mistake at this stage made all subsequent efforts almost meaningless. The first rule was to avoid lowlands, valleys, and dry riverbeds. The indigenous people knew that cold air is heavier than warm air. At night, it flows down from the highlands and accumulates at the lowest points of the landscape, forming pockets of icy fog. Spending the night in such a low-lying area guaranteed a constant struggle against the cold, even with good shelter. A small slope was considered the ideal place, but not at the very top where the wind reigned supreme. They looked for a thermal belt, the middle part of the slope, where the cold air had already flowed down and the wind from the top could not reach. The next factor was the wind. The shelter had to be protected from prevailing winds by natural barriers. This could be a dense grove, a rocky outcrop, a steep riverbank, or even just a large snowdrift. Using a natural windbreak saved a tremendous amount of energy and heat. An experienced eye always looked for signs of microclimate. For example, a place where the snow was thinner or where there was less frost on the trees indicated a warmer and more sheltered spot. They literally read the landscape in search of these small oases of warmth. The most important factor was dryness. Sleeping on damp ground, even if it was not frozen, was unacceptable. Moisture conducts heat dozens of times faster than dry soil. Therefore, they looked for areas with good drainage, such as sandy soil or a bed of dry pine needles. In winter, they preferred areas under the dense crowns of coniferous trees. The crowns not only protected them from the wind and falling snow, but also created drier and less frozen ground beneath them. The snow on the branches also served as additional insulation. Before clearing the site, they carefully trampled the snow. This created a dense, stable platform and prevented them from sinking into loose snow in the middle of the night. Only then did they begin clearing the site down to the ground. The availability of resources also played a role. The site had to be located near dry firewood, and more importantly, materials for the flooring itself. This meant proximity to coniferous trees for pine branches or dry meadows for grass. Choosing a location was not just a technical task, but almost a ritual. It required a deep understanding of nature, attention to detail, and the ability to predict how the weather would behave at night. This skill was as important as the ability to hunt. How much do you think modern humans have lost this ability to read the landscape and find natural shelters? But choosing a place is only half the battle. In the next chapter, we will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the peoples of the Subarctic, how they built beds that were warmer than any modern sleeping bag, using only what was at hand. I will reveal the best-kept secret of the survival masters of the North. The peoples of the Subarctic, such as the Cree and Athabascan, lived in conditions where winter lasted most of the year, and they had to adapt to these harsh conditions. For them, creating a warm bed was not just a convenience, but a necessity, without which survival in winter would have been virtually impossible. They did not have modern technology, but that did not prevent them from developing their own methods and using natural materials to create warmth and protection. What they created could be called a true marvel of engineering, which has survived to this day as an example of incredible ingenuity in the harshest climatic conditions. The peoples of the plains and subarctic faced some of the harshest winters in the world, and the need for adequate shelter was vital to them. In conditions where temperatures can drop to -40 degrees Celsius and below, any mistake in organizing protection from the cold could be fatal. That is why creating a warm and comfortable bed was such an important aspect of survival. The technology developed by these peoples involved not only the use of conventional materials, but also the application of multi-level solutions that minimize the impact of the cold and improve thermal insulation. These methods show how generations of experience and knowledge of nature can be used to create conditions that make the cold less dangerous. Their creation, multi-layered spruce flooring, is a true marvel of engineering. This method was not just a way to make a bed, but an art form in which each layer performed a specific function. The multi-layered structure prevented heat loss and provided not only warmth, but also comfort. It was a system that allowed people to sleep even in the most extreme conditions. Each layer, from the foundation to the top layer of pine needles, was carefully thought out and designed to retain heat and protect people from the cold. This flooring became an example of how natural materials can be used to create complex and effective systems that ensure survival even in the harshest conditions. This method had nothing to do with simply throwing branches on top of each other. It was a methodical, multi-stage process where each layer performed its own specific function. Initially, the surface was cleared and prepared for laying the materials, after which a step-by-step laying process began, each step of which was important to ensure effectiveness. The first layer was the foundation of the entire structure, providing stability and protection from the cold. It was not a random process, but a well-thought-out system based on years of experience and knowledge that helped people not only survive, but also live in conditions where conventional methods did not work. Laying each layer was key to creating the perfect bed that could maintain comfort even in the lowest temperatures. First, the foundation was laid on cleared and compacted ground or snow. The foundation was the first but extremely important step in creating a multi-layered floor. It was a layer of large, thick branches or even small logs laid parallel to each other. This layer served not only to increase the strength of the entire structure, but also to raise the entire structure above the cold surface. It was the first barrier to heat conduction, preventing direct contact with frozen ground or snow. Raising the floor provided a small air gap that acted as an insulator, blocking the cold from penetrating the bedding. It consisted of fairly large, thick branches or even small logs. These branches or logs were laid out to create a stable and sturdy foundation. Their purpose was not only to provide thermal insulation, but also to create an airspace that trapped heat inside. This foundation was a vital element because, without it, the entire structure would not be able to effectively combat the cold. The use of large, thick branches provided reliable support and ensured that the bed would be stable and durable in the future. It was the foundation that served as the basis for all subsequent layers, ensuring the long-term stability of the entire structure. This first layer was critically important. Its purpose was not to provide warmth, but to create an air gap. The main function of this layer was to raise the entire structure above the ground and create a spatial barrier to the cold. This layer was not meant to generate heat on its own, but it became the foundation for the other layers that would do so. It was not only a physical barrier, but also a thermal barrier that prevented cold from penetrating the bed structure. Its task was crucial as it provided long-term thermal insulation, keeping the structure stable and functional in conditions where every degree mattered. What if everything you were taught about life in a teepee is outdated? We are used to thinking of a teepee as a simple conical shelter made of animal skins, but in reality, it was a complex dwelling with a sophisticated ventilation and heating system, and sleeping in it had its own peculiarities. Fir flooring was not used here, but the problem of insulation from the cold ground remained just as acute. The main secret to keeping warm in a teepee was not the cone itself, but the inner lining, known as the ozona, or inner canopy. This lining was a strip of treated skins or thick fabric that was attached to poles from the inside at a height of 1.5 to 2 meters and hung down to the ground. The ozone served several important functions at once. First, it blocked the drafts that inevitably penetrated under the lower edge of the outer covering. Second, it created an upward airflow. Cold air from the street, entering under the outer edge of the teepee, was heated by the ground and internal heat, rose up in the gap between the walls and exited through the smoke hole. This system created a constant draft for the central hearth and effectively removed smoke, while cutting off cold air currents from the living space. The people inside were in a room within a room, protected from direct cold air. It was an ingenious solution for ventilation. The sleeping places in the teepee were not located in the center, but along the perimeter, in the rear, most spacious part of the dwelling. This was the warmest and most protected place from the entrance. But how was the problem of cold ground solved? Here, other materials came into play. The base of the bed was often made of woven mats of reeds or dry grass. These mats were good insulators in themselves, creating an air gap and a barrier against moisture. They were spread directly on the compacted earthen floor of the dwelling. The first layer of skins was laid on top of the mats. These were usually thick and durable bison skins, laid fur side down. The stiff fur created an additional springy air layer, and the thick skin served as a reliable barrier against residual moisture and cold. Only on top of this base were the sleeping beds spread out, softer and more comfortable skins, often with the fur facing up. These could be deer or antelope skins, or lighter bison skins that had been specially treated for softness. Many families also used willow backrests, structures made of twigs that served as a support for sitting during the day, and a kind of headboard at night. These backrests also helped to block out any accidental drafts and created a feeling of comfort. Thus, the plains dwellers slept on a multi-layered system consisting of the ground, a mat, a thick hide with the fur facing down, and a soft sleeping hide with the fur facing up. This system was not as high as a spruce floor, but in combination with the protection of the teepee and ozone, it worked perfectly. Have you ever slept in a dwelling like this? In the next chapter, you will learn how other peoples solved the problem of cold by literally rising above it. While the peoples of the plains and Subarctic struggled with the cold ground, the inhabitants of the eastern woods, such as the Iroquois, Haudenosaunee, found a radical solution. They realized that in order to survive the harsh winters, it was necessary not only to build warm dwellings, but also to change the very structure of their lives. Unlike other peoples, the Iroquois stopped sleeping on the ground, which was a crucial step in solving the problem of cold. Winter nights were long and harsh, and simply insulating the floor was no longer enough. The Iroquois came up with a completely new approach to building housing, which not only allowed them to keep themselves warm, but also brought people together in one space to maintain heat. Their famous longhouses were not just dwellings, but entire villages under one roof, with a unique system of organization. The longhouse became not only an architectural solution, but also a manifestation of social strategy. These houses could accommodate dozens or even hundreds of people, which created a special dynamic of interaction within. The dwellings were designed so that each person, while in the same room, was part of a large survival mechanism. The system that allowed for such efficient sharing of space was the result of many years of development and understanding of how to use collective efforts to survive in the icy winter conditions. Each dwelling was not just a separate house, but a single organism where all elements were interconnected. A longhouse was a huge wooden structure that housed dozens or even hundreds of people. The space inside was organized to maximize the heat generated by people and fire. The central passageway was the main place where the hearths were located, keeping the house warm. Along the walls were living areas that provided everyone with their own personal space. While the entire space was designed for efficiency in cold conditions, the hearths served as the main source of heat, creating a comfortable atmosphere in the house despite the cold winter months. This layout was not only convenient but also vital for survival in such harsh climatic conditions. The entire interior layout was designed for maximum efficiency and heat retention. The Iroquois thought through every detail, from the location of the hearths to the arrangement of the sleeping areas. The walls and roof provided excellent insulation, but the real secret to warmth lay in the design and layout of the space itself. The large number of people gathered in one place generated a tremendous amount of heat, and this heat was used to create comfortable conditions. All elements of the dwelling, including platforms, furniture, and even the arrangement of families, served to make the most efficient use of the heat generated. It was not just architecture, but true engineering and social harmony, allowing people to survive in the harshest climatic conditions. The sleeping areas were wide, stationary platforms built of wood. These platforms became the central element of the longhouse structure. They were located along the walls and occupied the entire length of the room, providing the necessary space for many families. The platforms were raised 30 to 40 centimeters above the earthen floor, which prevented contact with the cold ground and created comfortable sleeping conditions. This simple but ingenious approach solved one of the main problems of survival in the cold, retaining the heat radiated from the hearths. The platforms were not just a place to sleep. They became part of a common system in which heat was retained and evenly distributed. These platforms ran along both walls throughout the entire length of the house, interrupted only at the entrances. The design of the platforms allowed each person in the house to have their own space, but at the same time, everyone lived in one space, maintaining the overall warmth. The platforms were designed so that each person was as close as possible to the heat sources, but without losing their personal space. This ensured both comfort and practicality in a limited space. The division into platforms allowed each person to feel safe and private, but at the same time, everyone was part of a single system that supported life in the coldest conditions. It was an example of how to organize communal living, making the most efficient use of all available resources. They were raised 30 to 40 centimeters above the earthen floor. This additional gap between the floor and the platform was not just a design detail, but an important element in combating the cold. The platforms were raised so that the cold air that accumulated near the floor would not penetrate the sleeping areas. This solution was part of a well-thought-out system that used every possible resource to reduce heat loss. The platforms remained dry and warm, providing comfort in harsh winter conditions. Thus, every detail from the height of the platforms to their location was designed to minimize the impact of the outside cold and create a warm atmosphere inside the house for everyone. But the Iroquois went even further. They did not limit themselves to simple platforms, but created two-tiered structures that allowed for more efficient use of space. The upper tier was used not only as an additional sleeping place, but also as a shelf for storing things. This two-tier system was another example of how to make the most efficient use of space in limited conditions. People sleeping on the upper tier were in the warmest part of the house, where the air was hottest, which helped maintain a comfortable temperature. It also made it possible to improve the organization of the interior space and ensure that everyone had access to the most comfortable and warmest areas. These platforms were often two-tiered. This system made sleeping arrangements more comfortable and efficient, especially in conditions where every centimeter of living space was worth its weight in gold. The upper tier, located at a height, was the ideal place for those seeking greater insulation and comfort. It was a space where heat accumulated in the most efficient area of the house. This approach not only increased the amount of heat generated inside, but also made the space in the house as comfortable as possible for all its inhabitants. Such platforms were an important part of life in the Longhouse and provided comfort in the harshest climatic conditions. The lower tier served as both a bed and a bench during the day. The lower tier of the platforms was versatile and multifunctional. People not only slept here, but also used the space for daytime needs such as sitting, storing things, or preparing food. It was another way to make the most of the limited space. Guess which item of clothing was more important than any other for sleeping? The answer may surprise you. It was dry socks or their equivalent. But before we get to clothing, we need to understand how the Native American sleeping bag itself worked. It was not just a skin, but a sophisticated system of layers. It would be a key mistake to think that more means warmer. The peoples of the North knew that an excess of coverings was just as dangerous as a lack of them. The main task was not to sweat. Wet clothing or bedding in the cold instantly lost all its insulating properties and turned into an ice pack. Therefore, the sleeping system was always breathable and multi-layered. The first layer, as we have already established, was an insulator from the ground. Whether it was spruce flooring, a mat, or a fur skin with the fur side down, it created a base. On top of this base, a mattress was laid. This could be a softer skin, such as deer, or several layers of woven grass. Its purpose was comfort and additional insulation. It had to be porous enough not to accumulate moisture. The top covering, or blanket, was the most important. On the Great Plains, this was, of course, a bison skin. One large skin could serve as both a mattress and a blanket. One person would lie on one half, while the other would cover themselves with the other half. The secret was in how to use the fur. A common misconception is to sleep on soft fur. Often the thickest skin was placed first side down so that the stiff pile created an air layer, and people slept on the smooth leather side, covering themselves with another skin, fur side to the body. Sleepwear was an art form in itself. It was impossible to sleep in the same clothes that a person wore during the day. Daytime clothes inevitably became damp from sweat and melted snow. Before going to bed, they were either dried by the fire or changed into a special sleeping set. This set consisted of dry moccasins, dry leggings, and often a dry shirt. It was especially important to keep your feet dry. Wet feet guarantee that your whole body will freeze. Therefore, everyone always had a cherished pair of dry insoles for moccasins made of grass or fur. The moccasins themselves were often taken off at night so that the feet could breathe and dry out. People slept in dry, soft socks or insoles, wrapping their feet in skins. This prevented the shoes from getting damp from sweat during the night. Do you use the principle of layering in modern life? But all these layers are useless if you get wet from the inside. In the next chapter, we will reveal the second part of the secret, a special breathing technique. We have carefully examined how Native Americans insulated themselves from the cold ground and how they covered themselves from above. But there was another, more insidious source of moisture that could negate all these efforts. This source was the person themselves, or more precisely, their breath and sweat. Every human exhalation contains a significant amount of water vapor. In a cold environment, this vapor immediately condenses and freezes, turning into frost. Anyone who has tried to sleep in the cold, wrapped up in a sleeping bag, knows this effect. After a couple of hours, the edge of the bag is covered with a crust of ice. Indigenous peoples were well aware of this problem. If you breathe inside your fur shelter, all the moisture will settle on the fur. At night, the fur will become damp, and its insulating properties will drop sharply. By morning, it may simply freeze into a hard, icy shell. Therefore, the first and most important rule was, never breathe inside your sleeping bag or shelter. Your head, or at least your face, should always remain outside in the cold air. This seems illogical because your face will freeze. They used several techniques to protect their faces. Sometimes it was a parka hood or a special fur bandage that covered everything except the nose and mouth. But more often than not, they simply relied on acclimatization and proper positioning near the fire. The most experienced practitioners of the North used a technique similar to breathing through a tube. They could cover their mouth and nose with the edge of their fur clothing, but they did so in such a way that the exhaled air went outside, not inside the sleeping cocoon. The fur served as a filter, slightly warming the inhaled air. The second problem was sweat. Even at rest, the body secretes moisture. If the shelter was too warm or a person went to bed overheated after hard work, they inevitably began to sweat. Sweating in the cold was tantamount to disaster. Therefore, their sleeping system was always ventilated. The skins were not sealed tightly. There was always room for air circulation and excess moisture to escape. If it got hot, it was better to open up slightly and let in some cold air than to overheat. They regulated their heat not only with layers, but also with their behavior. They went to bed only after cooling down after work and always in dry clothes. Their entire system was aimed at maintaining a delicate balance, staying warm but never sweating. In the morning, regardless of the weather, all sleeping skins and clothes were taken out of the dwelling. They were thoroughly shaken out to remove the frost that had formed overnight and, if possible, aired and dried in the sun or by the fire. This daily routine of combating moisture was as important as obtaining food. They understood that moisture was the hidden ally of the cold. Victory over the cold was impossible without victory over moisture, both external and internal. All the ingenious flooring and dry skins would have been useless without the most important thing, a source of heat. That source was the human body itself. Native Americans viewed their bodies as stoves that needed to be properly loaded with fuel and prepared for a long, cold night. Preparation for sleep began long before dark, namely with the last meal. In order for the body to generate heat throughout the night, it needed high-calorie, slow fuel. The ideal food for this was fats and proteins. On the plains, this could be pemmican, a concentrate of dried ground meat, fat, and berries. In forested areas, it could be fatty beaver or bear meat or deer bone marrow. Carbohydrates provided quick energy, but it was fat that burned long and hot, maintaining the body's internal temperature. Eating was not just a matter of satisfying hunger, but a strategic loading of fuel into the furnace. Eating a hearty fatty meal before bed was not a whim, but a necessity. It gave the body resources that it could slowly burn during 8 to 10 hours of darkness. The next step was preliminary kindling. Going to bed cold was a bad idea. The body, having already lost heat, would spend precious energy not on maintaining, but on restoring its temperature. Therefore, before going to bed, they tried to warm up gently. They did not do intense exercise so as not to sweat. It could be a light massage, rubbing their limbs, or just sitting by the fire. The heat of the fire penetrated their clothes and skins, making them warm and dry before bedtime. But the most ingenious technology was the Native American hot water bottle. These were ordinary smooth stones of medium size, which were abundant near any stream. These stones were placed in or near the fire for several hours. During this time, the stones accumulated a tremendous amount of heat. Before going to bed, they were carefully removed, swept clean of ash, and wrapped in a piece of thick leather or fabric to avoid burns. This simple hot water bottle was incredibly effective. It was placed inside the sleeping area a few minutes before going to bed. The stone preheated the floor and skins, creating a warm and cozy nest. Then it could be placed at the feet or pressed against the body. As the stone slowly cooled, it gave off its heat for several hours. It ensured a comfortable sleep and gave the body a head start, allowing it to save energy on the initial warming of the bed. It was a simple but incredibly clever way to maximize the energy of the fire. So, the place has been chosen, the platform has been built, the stove has been loaded with fuel, and the stone heater lies at your feet. But the night is long and the frost does not recede. What to do if you wake up in the middle of the night from the penetrating cold? Indigenous peoples had answers to this question as well. The first and most incorrect reaction would be to instinctively curl up into a tight ball. Although this reduces the surface area losing heat, it also stiffens the muscles and impairs blood circulation. In the long run, this led to even more freezing. Experienced northerners knew that when awakened by the cold, they needed to generate a new burst of heat immediately. But climbing out of their warm nest into the frost was the last thing they wanted to do. The solution had to be found within the sleeping area itself. They used isometric exercises. Without changing position or removing their coverings, people began to alternately and forcefully tense large muscle groups: legs, buttocks, abs, arms, and back. Such static tension did not require movement, but forced the muscles to work actively. This work required energy, which was immediately converted into internal heat. After a few minutes of such exercises, a warming wave spread throughout the body. Blood circulation increased, and frozen limbs were once again filled with warm blood. Another important factor was social thermoregulation. In most Native American cultures, people rarely slept alone. In a tipi or wigwam, the family slept together, huddling close to each other for warmth. This method, known as huddling or shared shelter, was the most effective way to conserve heat. Several bodies under one large skin generated much more heat and lost it more slowly than individually. The warmth of one person warmed another. It also solved the problem of vulnerable members of the group. They were placed in the center between adults, receiving warmth from both sides and being as protected as possible. It was a collective approach to survival. Finally, there was the factor of fire. In tipis on the plains or in wigwams in the forests, a small fire was often kept burning. It was not a roaring blaze, but a few smoldering logs that provided steady, constant heat. Maintaining this fire was a shared responsibility. Anyone who woke up at night and saw that the fire was dying down would throw on a log. It was not just a source of light, but the heart of the dwelling, sustaining life in the darkest and coldest hours. We have already touched on the Longhouse as an architectural solution. It was not just an architectural form, but also a manifestation of an ingenious approach to the problems of survival in cold climates. The Iroquois Longhouse became an example of how collectivism can be the solution to even such global problems as warmth and harsh winters. Behind it lay not only a rational calculation in construction, but also a deep understanding of how people can use collective efforts to survive in extreme conditions. This house became an example of how coordination and mutual assistance can make harsh climates more tolerable. In this context, the Longhouse became a true social and engineering achievement. But its main secret to warmth was not only in the platforms and roof, but in the very principle of collectivism. The architecture of the Longhouse was designed to provide warmth and comfort even in extreme cold. Dozens of people united under one roof created real energy, which became the main source of heat. This solution was part of the lifestyle and philosophy of a people who valued connection and helping each other. In such conditions, the house became not just a shelter, but also a space where the temperature was maintained not only thanks to its construction, but also thanks to the fact that the people themselves created a powerful source of heat. It was not just a building, it was a living organism that sustained itself through the interaction of all its parts. Imagine a huge room where 20 families live under one roof. Unlike ordinary houses where everyone lives in their own individual space, the Longhouse was an example of how everyone could join forces. Many families coexisted under one roof, each with their own personal spaces and needs. The families lived along a central passageway, and each of their hearths heated two neighboring spaces. All this was done to make the most efficient use of the heat produced by people and fire. This approach reduced heat loss and created more comfortable conditions for everyone. It was a house where there was no such thing as loneliness, and everyone was an important part of the overall system. Along the central passageway, there were not one, but 10 or 15 hearths. The central place in the house was occupied by a system of hearths on which the heat depended. The hearths were arranged in such a way that the heat they produced spread throughout the house, providing warmth in different parts of this huge living space. Each hearth served two families who lived opposite each other, allowing the heat to be shared efficiently among everyone. The amount of heat generated by these hearths was simply enormous. This was created not only by the fire, but also by the fact that people were gathered in one place, and their breathing, movements, and work also contributed to maintaining the temperature. Each hearth served two families living opposite each other. The idea behind the design of the Longhouse was to use every possible resource to generate heat. The hearths were positioned so that their energy was distributed throughout the house, while providing maximum insulation between families. Everything in this house was subordinated to one goal: heat conservation. Even in such a huge space where several dozen people lived, the heat from each hearth was combined with the others and distributed efficiently. The people in the house lived in warmth and safety without wasting extra effort on creating individual hearths. This is not just a house, it is an entire street covered by a roof. Each Longhouse could be perceived as an entire community, united not only under one roof, but also by a common goal: to survive the harsh winters. Under one roof, it was possible to create your own little world in which family hearths were united, generating a huge amount of heat. The advantage of this arrangement was that no family was left alone to face the cold. The house became a symbol of collective survival, where everyone was important to the common goal. This form of housing was much more effective than individual dwellings because it united people into a single, warm, and protected community. The amount of heat generated by these hearths was enormous. Each hearth was a source of heat, but people gathering in one place created an even greater effect. Several dozen people living in one room actively moved, worked, and breathed, generating heat with their breath and movements. The heat created in this way complemented that provided by the hearths, creating a climate inside the house that significantly increased survival in such cold conditions. The coordination and interaction of people thus became an important part of the whole system. In a house where the temperature could drop to extreme levels, a person became not just part of the system, but also an important unit in the creation of heat. But even more heat was generated by the people themselves. Life inside such a house was dynamic and active, and each person contributed to the overall process of maintaining warmth. It was a house where survival was collective, and where interaction between people ensured success. People were constantly moving, supporting each other, and creating collective warmth. It was a principle of survival based on the idea that each person becomes not only part of the community, but also a source of heat. This proved that survival in harsh conditions is only possible when people work as a single unit in a coordinated and effective manner. The architecture of the house was designed so as not to lose a single drop of this precious warmth. The walls and roof of the Longhouse were thought out to the smallest detail to retain as much of the heat produced by people and hearths as possible. Many small details in the design were created specifically to minimize heat loss. We can see that the secret method of the Native Americans was not a single technique, but a complex multi-level system. It was a deep understanding of physics, multiplied by thousands of years of experience. It began with the right choice of location, continued with the ingenious art of flooring, and ended with control over internal moisture through breathing. They didn't just fight the cold, they controlled it. They used insulation to trick the earth. They used layering to manage heat. They used collective wisdom to keep each other warm. From the spruce flooring of the Subarctic to the platforms of the Longhouse, every solution was perfectly adapted to its environment. This legacy is not just a set of survival tricks. It is a whole philosophy of harmonious and intelligent interaction with a harsh world. It is a reminder that knowledge and ingenuity can be more important than any technology. What other topics related to the lives of the indigenous peoples of North America would you like us to cover? Perhaps you are interested in their methods of hunting, cooking, or navigation. Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes.